Alright, so let's go over this review. I'm going to go through just the odds. I'm going to try and go through as thoroughly as possible without being too long-winded. So when you're just simplifying, what you're trying to do is basically reduce. You're reducing your fraction. You're reducing what you've got. Now, there's two types of reducing. When you've got something that's just being multiplied and something that is being added. When you've got something that's connected by a plus sign or a minus sign, these are binomials, and you cannot just cancel out anything from a binomial. You first have to factor. And in this case, we're going to find our greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor of the numerator is going to be 6x squared. And when you take 6x squared, divide 6x cubed by 6x squared, you're left with x plus 6x squared divided by 6x squared is 1. So that is my numerator factored out with the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of the denominator is going to be 2x. And I'm left with x squared minus 1. Now at this point you may be able to see that 6 and 2 can be reduced and the x's can be reduced. So if you want to go ahead and reduce those, you would get 3 because 2 divided into 6 is 3. And when you have x in the denominator and x squared in the numerator, you can cancel out one of those x's. So you'd be left with 3x. X plus 1 over x squared minus 1. Now, this is not your final answer because this x squared minus 1 is the difference of two perfect squares. X squared is a perfect squared and 1 is a perfect squared, and you have a negative sign in the middle, which means that a minus sign, so you're subtracting, which is the difference. So this can be factored into, your numerator would stay the same, but your denominator can be factored further into the square root of x squared is x plus 1. X, the square root of 1 is 1, so you're doing the square root of x squared, the square root of 1. So now that we've got this, we can cancel out the x plus 1s, because x plus 1 divided by x plus 1 is 1. That's why they cancel out. And I'm left with 3x over x minus 1. Okay, so now we're going to go on to number 3. Now we're multiplying these two fractions. And again, we're going to want to factor first. We're trying to see if any of them reduce. So, and we've got two binomials. This is linked by a minus sign. These numbers are linked by a minus sign. They're being multiplied by to get together, but this binomial is being multiplied by this binomial. So be very careful to recognize when you're multiplying, when you're adding, when you're subtracting, and what you're multiplying, adding, and subtracting. So I'm going to take this binomial first, and I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor, which I see 42 and 24, and a squared and a. So I can factor out a 6a, get 7a minus 4 divided by 21a and minus 12. I can factor out a 3, and I'm left with 7a minus 4 times, I'm going to take this binomial, and what can I factor out of that binomial? I can factor out a 3. I'm left with a minus 3. And I'm going to look at this binomial, and I'm going to factor out what can I factor out of that binomial. And I'm left with 6a. 6a squared divided by 6a is a. and I would be left with minus 4. I'm sorry, plus 4. So from here, I can start looking to see what cancels out. What would reduce or cancel? My binomials have to be exactly the same. So since 7a minus 4 divided by 7a minus 4 would equal 1, I can cancel those out because that would equal 1. So now I can look at my other binomials, a minus 3 and a plus 4. Those will not cancel out because they are two different numbers. But I look here and I see that 6a times 3 divided by 3 times 6a. And I notice that eventually these are going to be multiplied together. But I can go ahead and say 6a divided by 6a would give me 1, so those will cancel out. And 3 divided by 3 would give me 1, so those would cancel out. So my final answer is just going to be a minus 3 divided by a plus 4. Alright, moving on. Now we have a division sign. So here, make sure that you remember that when you multiply, you multiply your numerators and then you multiply your denominators. Okay, so when you divide, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to factor first. You're going to see what can be factored. You've got a perfect square here minus a perfect square here. So the square root of w squared is w. And the square root of 81 is 9. So I get w minus 9, w plus 9. Because if you were to multiply that back out, you would get w squared minus 81. My denominator. So how do you factor a trinomial? Trinomial with 3. You can use your big X. And you multiply your a times your c, which is going to be 4 times negative 7 is negative 28. At the bottom you get 27 is your b. What two numbers are going to multiply to give you negative 28 and add to give you positive 27? Well, I know one's got to be positive and one's got to be negative to multiply to give me a negative number, and that would be 28 minus 1. Now, since we have a number in front of our variable here as our a value, we need to do our grouping. So I got 4w squared plus 28w minus 1 minus 7, minus 1w. I'm running out of room. That's minus 1w minus 7. So when I group these, I can factor out a 4w, and I'm left with w plus 7. I'm going to bring down that negative sign, and when I factor out a 1, I'm left with w plus 7, because I factored out a negative 1. When I multiplied that back, I would get, that is the same thing. Sorry, guys. It's real life here. So minus 1w minus 7. And when you factor out a negative, you get plus 7. So I'm left with 4w minus 1, which is this and this. You're basically factoring out a w plus 7 from this situation. So that is what goes in my denominator here. So basically this has been factored into this. So I'm left with 4w minus 1 times w plus 7. Now, I get another piece of paper. So this is this first one. I have w minus 9, w plus 9 over 4w minus 1, w plus 7. This also needs to be factored. So I'm going to say divided by what two numbers multiply to give me 36 and add to give me negative 5. So if I think about my factors of 36, 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. What are going to multiply to give me negative 36 and add to give me negative 5? I know one of them has to be negative and the other has to be positive. So if I have negative 9 and positive 4, that should work. So W minus 9, W plus 4. When I factor this, I'm going to look and see what's going to multiply to give me 28 and add to give me 11. So I think about my factors of 28. I got 1 and 28, 2 and 14, and 4 and 7. So these are positive, this is positive, so both of my numbers are going to have to be positive. And so I know that when I add 4 and 7 together, they're going to give me 11. So W plus 4, W plus 7. So now I've factored. That's step 1, is factoring. Now, when I'm multiplying, I've got to remember multiply or dot and flip the second fraction. Make sure you're flipping your second fraction. So I'll change this to W minus 9 times W plus 9 over 4W minus 1, W plus 7. Now I'm going to change this division sign to a multiplication sign, my dot, and then I'm going to flip this second fraction. So I'll get W plus 4 on the top, W plus 7. My denominator becomes my numerator, and my numerator becomes my denominator. And now I get to start crossing things out. So, do I have anything that's going to become 1 divided by W minus 9 divided by W minus 9? That'll give me 1. W plus 9, I do not have anything in the denominator that'll give me 1. W plus 4 divided by W plus 4, that'll give me 1. And W plus 7 divided by W plus 7, that'll give me 1. So I'm left with W plus 9 over 4W minus 1. And that is your answer. Alright guys, that's it for right now. I'll do another video for the rest, or for some more.